Robby, what is in your radar?
Well, mainstream media mouthpiece Kara Swisher, a journalist known for extremely negative and hostile coverage of tech figures like Elon Musk and others, is really, really mad that the billionaires of Silicon Valley have figured out one neat trick to avoid paying California's proposed massive wealth tax. They're simply going to leave the state. And I, for one, find it amusing that Peter Thiel, Sergey Brin, David Sachs, Larry Page so easily foiled the Democrats' plot to confiscate 5% of their wealth. But Swisher, she's furious. Here she was raging at the billionaires and claiming they owe it to the state of California to submit and personally pay off the state's considerable debts. Take a look.
I have of two minds of this. One is you made and I said it to one this weekend. I said, you made all your money in California, you ingrateful piece of shit. You could figure out a way to pay more taxes, and we deserve the taxes from you, given you made your wealth here. The second thing is, yes, there are different ways to do this, but the length of time it would take and the kind of vehemence you would fight whatever happens means nothing would happen. So why don't we just do shock and awe at this point? Because you don't seem to be, availing yourself to thinking that you owe your state something more, which they don't think that at all.
We deserve the taxes from you. That's what Swisher thinks. My question, who is we? I feel differently than her, and I expect most people watching this do as well. Let's state our values plainly. See if you agree. No one is entitled to the fruits of another person's labors. No one deserves someone else's money. No one who earned their fortune legitimately through their own hard work should be morally or legally or philosophically obligated to fork it over to the state. That doesn't mean the wealthy should pay zero taxes. Of course, the government needs to collect some tax revenue to pay for the upkeep of the things it owns, roads, parks, etc., and to maintain the services that are the rightful purview of the state, courts, police, fire, and so on. We also accept in modern society that we don't want the needy and the infirm and the elderly to starve or to go without medical care, and so we have broadly agreed as a society that the rich will pay, frankly, more than their fair share in order to provide for the welfare of the less fortunate to varying degrees, and we debate those all the time. But when a state grossly mismanages its own funds, despite taking in $270 billion a year in tax revenue, it's not the responsibility of people who already cough up billions of dollars to come to California's rescue. Swisher has the relationship between California and the tech entrepreneurs backwards. It is not California that has made the tech sector great, it is the tech sector that has made California great. The state has benefited from their wealth, from the successful companies that they've started, from the people they've employed, from the technology they've created. Yes, it's a nice place to live. The weather's pretty great. I've been there. But the weather's nice in Florida too, and the regulatory policies, I think, are even nicer. I think deep down that's what really annoys the Kara Swishers of the world. The revelation that under the capitalist system, successful people don't need the government to help them. They just need it to leave them alone. The European Union is obsessed with strangling its tech sector in the crib, and so they have no major successful tech companies to speak of in Europe. Just leave business alone, and you get huge success and riches, and then sure, you can use some of that money, you can take it and fund public projects and also take care of the poor. But you can't simultaneously demonize the wealthy and then expect them to bail out a bankrupt state. But for the progressive left, it's taken as a fact that you didn't build that, the government did. Remember when President Obama confessed that this was his entire outlook?
Somebody helped to create this unbelievable American system that we have that allowed you to thrive. Somebody invested in roads and bridges. If you got a business, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen.
Sorry, Kara Swisher, you didn't build that. Elon Musk did. David Sachs did. Larry Page did. And if you want to confiscate even more of their wealth, then they will build it somewhere else. Somewhere I suspect the Republicans are in charge.
Listen, I'm pro-business.
I know you are. That's something I like about you. You're a businesswoman yourself.
Thank you. And I'm more on the side of Gavin Newsom here, Governor Gavin Newsom, as opposed to like Ro Khanna. I know that he is pushing this forward. I think that we shouldn't penalize people for getting to the top of this American dream, right? We are telling people you can do it, you can become anything, you can become a billionaire here, but then you're getting taxed in a state that's already heavily taxed.
Kara Swisher hates them. She holds them in
I understand.
contempt.
Her,
she
Elizabeth Warren, a lot of people.
Contempt.
I don't think wealthy people are saying don't change the rules altogether. I think they're saying don't change retroactively taxing me and start to really make me comb through all my finances.
It's desperate.
Uncomfortable.
It's looking at the state, looking at its balance sheet, figuring it's screwed and frantic. What can we do? What can we do? Okay, we can take more money from them. It's not well thought out.
But even though I support entrepreneurship, I think like sometimes the wealthiest Americans, you know this, Robby, they pay a lower effective tax rate than people that are middle class, like nurses and, regular people. And so I think in California, specifically when so much wealth has been built in the tech center, people could do better to pay their fair share. And we know that every wealthy person finds a way around it. We heard the old stories of offshore accounts and finding ways to not pay taxes, giving to charity, doing whatever you want to write off all these expenses so you just get the money right back. But I think if you don't want the 5% wealth tax, I was trying to figure out what else can you do? Because I'm not on the side of people who have regular 9-to-5s and are middle class pay more of the effective tax rate than wealthy people. I do think they should pay their share, even though it's a lot more money of what they're paying, and people in middle class should not be paying higher. So we could try to equalize those capital gains taxes so that they're paying the same amount as ordinary income holders, right? That's one thing. We could end the step-up basis loophole that I saw, which allows inherited wealth to not be taxed entirely at all. And so this is, again, if you're just passing on to your dad's company and he's a billionaire and you become a billionaire by default, okay, you've inherited that. You can pay your fair share of taxes as a new owner of that business, right? Aren't these different ways that in California, as the rich continue to keep their family lineage rich for decades, that they can continue to give back without avoiding a lot of these loopholes that rich people tend to avoid? I mean, we can figure out how to balance it. They're trying to take care of social services in California, which is important. You said we have an obligation to take care of our elderly.
It's not all social services, though. Sometimes it's the pensions of employees, of state employees. The people pushing this wealth tax, it's government unions. It's not, the union for some private company where it's the auto manufacturer and the employees of the factory are unionized to make sure the conditions are not, unsafe for them. Okay, I understand unions. These are people protecting pension systems and employee benefit systems that no longer exist in the private sector because they're too exorbitant. They're from a time period where you retired at 65 and then you died at 75. People live a lot longer, and that's great, but we now have to take care of people longer and longer and longer. Doesn't make sense. Propping up a system that the private employees, it's better than what private employees have. That's what it goes into. Those kinds of benefits for government employees, many of whom I believe positions could be eliminated in the first place. So that's it's not that people are going to go hungry on the streets. It's that, there are going to be fewer protections for teachers' unions or police unions. If you're of a liberal, you can be upset about that too.
I mean, a lot of people in California, not a lot of people, they've tried this before. In 2003, 2004, they tried to pass something similar and it failed. And so I don't know that this is going to go through. I think it's causing a lot of ruckus. But if you see people already moving, I think that should be a sign and indication for California that's a problem. But Gavin Newsom has been clear that he thinks people are leaving other states in droves as well. He's pointed that out on podcasts recently. So he said, don't just pick on California, even though they're doing this.
But I love doing it. Well, I'm not picking on the state. I feel bad for the people who live there.
Robby, what's on your radar?
Rubs me the wrong way as well, and I'll talk about it in a minute. But first, Governor Gavin Newsom can't handle the truth, or at least isn't able to articulate what the truth is. Here he was flubbing a very basic and fundamental question from Ben Shapiro about whether men can become women.
But this idea that Trump says people are going to public schools and coming back, having surgeries and coming back the next day is absurd.
No, but there are certainly cases in which kids are being, quote unquote, socially transitioned at school without parents knowing about it. I know some of the parents to whom this has happened. I mean, this is the fundamental question that lies at the root of all of this is the question that you're not wanting to answer, which is whether boys can become girls.
Yeah, I think for the grace of God. Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate the sympathy. I also feel terrible for anybody who's suffering with any sort of
I think it's
mental or
been
physical
the
condition.
case
That's
for
terrible, but
generations, for time immemorial. God bless.
Well, he's not the only one, of course, who struggles to have a coherent answer. Most Democrats, including most of the 2028 contenders, do not want to answer even easier questions about transgender issues. Axios tried to get them on the record on whether trans girls should compete against biological girls in women's sports. And most people dodged that question entirely. Almost all ducked it, writes Axios' CEO. Let's be specific. The list of Democrats who would not even bother responding to that simple question is as follows: Kamala Harris, AOC, J.B. Pritzker, Cory Booker, Andy Beshear, Chris Murphy, Ro Khanna, and Gavin Newsom. The ones who did respond to the question were Josh Shapiro, Pete Buttigieg, and Rahm Emanuel. Shapiro said he did not want trans athletes to have an unfair advantage. Emanuel said flatly, no, they shouldn't compete. And Buttigieg said, well, this was largely a question for sports leagues, not the government. Credit to them, I guess, for even bothering to respond, because most Democrats don't want to admit that they either agree with their radical progressive base on this issue, or more likely are afraid of offending their radical progressive base. Now, trans people, of course, deserve dignity and compassion, equal treatment. The government should not interfere with private medical decisions, in my view, made by consenting adults. With children, it's different. We all broadly accept that the state does take an interest in determining what medical care is appropriate for minors. And then, when we get to youth sports and schools and those accommodations, it's obvious that we need sane policies the vast majority of Americans agree with, which put common sense limitations in place. We cannot have a teenage boy declare himself a teenage girl and suddenly gain access to the girls' locker room or inclusion on the girls' swim team, because that would be completely ridiculous. And if Democrats do not realize that that is ridiculous, and more importantly, admit it's ridiculous, they're going to lose elections. Don't tell Tim Miller that, though. The Bulwark commentator responded to the Axios inquiry on X, writing, "Can a man become a woman is such a rage-bait BS question. It has no bearing on policy. In a free country, an adult can become whatever they want if they don't harm others. The DHS secretary has an entirely new face, and the president wears more makeup than most drag queens." Okay, but wearing a lot of makeup does not magically transform a man into a woman, and a facelift doesn't change a woman into a man. That's kind of the whole point of this debate, that the fundamental truth of a person's biology remains constant despite surface-level cosmetic changes, even very invasive ones. Or at least that's what most people believe. If you feel differently, Democratic presidential aspirants, well, you're welcome to say so. See something, say something. How about that?
Yeah.
Heard you chuckling, Lindsay?
Read that Bulwark quote again.
That he wears as much makeup as a drag queen.
Does the president, do you find that he wears that much makeup?
I don't know. We all wear makeup on TV. I'm wearing makeup right now. I don't wear makeup in my personal life. Many ladies do. That's fine. Some men do, most don't. I don't in my personal life, but we all do for television.
Okay, I'll reel it in.
But when you wear wearing makeup doesn't turn you into a girl.
It doesn't. And
so that was a little ridiculous there, Tim.
Okay, so I think like everybody's conflating every issue. The sports issue for me is, well, everyone who's asking the question, can men become women? Like, okay, that is a little bit of rage bait. And then there's also just answer the question about the sports, the schools, like the small nominations that this is happening in, like to address it. Yes, there should be just, maybe there's an open gender bathroom. Maybe there's a girls and boys. I don't really care. In school, I would like my kid to learn. I don't think this is a huge issue. But also in that interview that we saw with Governor Gavin Newsom, something that I wanted to bring up is that he said never has so much attention been paid to so few people. And I think, again, when you look at what's happening in the transgender community, 1% of people in the U.S. identify as transgender. Yeah. But this is every single question on the minds of every single podcaster.
Well,
every single conservative person.
Well, small number.
Like a gotcha. And it's like, what are we doing? Because, like, okay, maybe they shouldn't compete in the Olympics. But
it takes a small number of them to win at the sport.
I know, but because there's an avoidance happening in the Democratic Party, I think maybe part of that is just having respect, because not a lot of people from the actual trans community are ever included or considered in the conversation. And I'm talking about of sound mind that have a dialogue about transitioning as an adult. So maybe we bring some more adults in the room to discuss how they're feeling about themselves and stop being these outsiders always trying to impose.
No one's complaining about the adults transitioning. That's fine. I support that. I don't care.
The question is can a girl become a boy? And it's like, okay, so you want me to tell this grown adult who transitioned that they can't possibly do that? Like, why does that matter to Gavin Newsom? If that question is like, can you become, to them they can. He's like, live and let live. That's his biggest thing, is to live and let live. So why is it, let God judge them? Like, all these people with all these religious values, okay, so it's not for you, then don't be trans. You don't be trans if you don't want to. Why do you want to condemn the entire community?
Okay. Live and let live, I agree with, but this is an issue because there are public policies attached to it and there are public accommodations attached to it, and people are uncomfortable not wanting said individuals. Again, I don't care for whatever, the bathroom at the airport. Who cares? I agree. I don't care. the bathroom is not some sacred space. The public, like, whatever. But locker rooms, it's an uncomfortable time for teenagers. Having to be, disrobe, changing for sports games in front of other people. I would like more privacy in that regard anyway, just for young people. It's a horrifying experience for a lot of kids. But you can't just have people can change their label at whim and then gain access to those facilities for teenagers, and then, more importantly, compete on the actual teams. It's not competitive.
This is not
blow them out of the water.
This is not sweeping the globe of like the biggest problem.
There only has to be one in the league for them to win every.
Oh my gosh!
They'll be the state champion.
Okay, so perhaps
that's true.
Perhaps we should develop a trans league then. Perhaps we should, but it also goes.
To your point, there's not enough. I agree that would be a better outcome.
Right,
but to your point, there's not enough of
But
it.
that's what I mean about including people in the conversation to figure out what the next steps are, rather than trying to isolate and say your experience is not valid, and so we're just going to discredit that you believe this is your life experience, right? It's not for Gavin Newsom or some of these leaders to determine that. They're like, why am I jumping in this conversation that affects 1% of America? The way that Republicans line it up is that it's overly taking over the world. Every sport, my kid's not going to have an opportunity to go to college because our scholarship's going to be taken by somebody.
I mean, that happens.
Like, no.
That happens.
It's not running amok. So why? So the economy's bad. There's other things that are happening. Why don't we focus on something that makes sense to focus on rather than trying to have a gotcha moment with Gavin Newsom?
Don't focus on argument. Okay, yes. Is it the most important issue facing the human civilization? Well, no, but no specific issue is. You can delegitimize a conversation about everything based on that, because unless we're talking about thermonuclear war or something, then it doesn't seem as important. I don't know why Democrats can't just admit that the far left base has gone insane on this for the accommodations for kids, and there should be nobody who's biologically male competing against.
Well, Ben Shapiro's question wasn't specifically about kids. He did ask if a man can become a woman, right, biologically. So that was going to overarchingly give an answer to the community to say that he doesn't see the adult's experience, which I would
just say, no, you can't change the number of chromosomes you have. You can become a man can become a trans woman, and there's a new category for that, and that's fine, and that deserves accommodations, but you can't change the number of chromosomes you have.
Robby, what's on your radar?
Well, CNN's Scott Jennings is spitting fire, objecting to bald-faced lies spouting by one of his fellow panelists. Now, we already discussed some of the clips from that recent episode, but I was gobsmacked when I saw this one. Cameron Kasky, progressive commentator and briefly a Democratic candidate for the House, he accused President Trump of being part of a sex trafficking ring. Jennings rightly called him out for uttering such an absurd lie. Watch this.
I am appreciative that the president is being transparent about this. I would love it if he was more transparent about the human sex trafficking network that he was a part of, but you can't win them all.
Cameron's grateful that the president is being transparent about the Nobel Peace Prize and his desires for Greenland. Scott, what do you think about that?
You going to let that sit? Are we going to claim here on CNN that the president is part of a global sex trafficking ring, or?
Well,
I mean,
we're going to talk about the Epstein file. Scott, I will do the fact checking as we go along here. Repeat what you said about the global sex trafficking ring.
That Donald Trump was provably very involved with it?
Okay, we'll get to that later. I mean, Donald Trump has never been charged with any crimes in relation to Jeffrey Epstein. But
let's be adults here.
We'll talk about Epstein
Let's be
files
serious.
Later. Satisfied? Now answer the question about Greenland.
So let's reiterate. Kasky said Donald Trump was provably very involved with a global sex trafficking ring. This is, of course, false. Trump was provably an acquaintance of Jeffrey Epstein, a sexual predator in the 90s and early aughts, just like the Clintons and a whole host of other famous people. Trump's association with Epstein ended before the sex crimes came to light, and no one has presented a shred of evidence that Trump was involved in the sex crimes. Nor have they proven the Clintons were either. This is where the discourse is surrounding Epstein. Anyone who has met him even once can be smeared as very involved in a sex trafficking ring on CNN. To be clear, the network is not responsible for the crazy things its guests say. They should have on a range of perspectives, of course. I expect, however, that they would not invite to sit on one of those panels a 9/11 truther, or Stop the Steal obsessive, or, to use an even more similar example, a Pizzagate conspiracy theorist. Pizzagate, remember that one? You may recall that it was an online social media conspiracy promoted by fringe far-right personalities, that there was an underground child sex ring at a pizza place in Washington, D.C., and it was somehow connected to the Clintons and to other high-profile Democrats. Responsible mainstream journalists worked to debunk the conspiracy theory. They did not invite its adherents to become regular commentators on CNN. My, how times have changed. In fairness to Kasky, the Epstein sex trafficking ring is real, and it has real victims, and it is right to keep seeking answers about who else might have been involved with it. I support efforts by Thomas Massie, Ro Khanna, and others to release all government files relating to Epstein, and I've criticized the administration for moving slowly on that. But you just can't say that Trump is provably very involved in a sex trafficking ring. That's totally false, and it's made up, and it's the kind of vicious smear, in fact, that discredits good faith efforts to expose Epstein and his fellow abusers. And Trump is a litigious man, and I wonder if he caught wind of that clip because it seemed a little bit defamatory to me.
Well, like you
very
said,
involved.
First of all, Abby Phillips can't take vacation anymore because if she was there, she probably would have just cleared that up. But also, Scott Jennings rightfully asked the host to correct it because it's not
they
the
don't
job.
Get sued.
Yeah, it's not the job of the commentators. Like, it is their job to be well read and state facts more than their analysis leading. Like, you hope that the people that are given this platform that people automatically assume is of expertise will actually do some research and make sure that they're making proven statements. But when it happens that something that you say is miscalculated or overstated, the host should certainly clear it up, right? That's the job of CNN. But also,
overstated, just a lie. What if I wanted to have on one of those people who thought the Clintons murdered Seth Rich or something? Remember that conspiracy? All those various.
Yeah, I know, but say someone has Candace Owens on. She's saying conspiracy theories. You say some conspiracy theories are worth giving air to. So you have to correct that nothing has been proven. That's the host's job. But this is exactly how a real issue turns into like a partisan back and forth and a partisan sludge, because you can prove that the president needs to come forward and say more about Epstein and say that you don't like the way that the administration is handling the documents, the fact that they released only 1% and have millions of more pages, 500 different people combing through these things, redacting everything. You can say that firmly with your chest as a contributor that doesn't like the way that the administration is handling this. But you don't have to start to add fluff in there to make the president feel guilty of more than we have any type of proof of. People are saying you're not handling this well. We've seen several polls say they want more information. The American public wants more information. But trying to say that the president and connecting dots that just aren't there, that criminalize him.
I'm forced to consider that this commentator is representative of a wide swath of the population, a representative of liberal, progressive, democratic thought. Democrats have convinced themselves that Trump is provably involved with Epstein in the same way that some on the right have convinced themselves the Clintons are provably involved. And I said this yesterday, and I will continue to say it, that this has moved into conspiracy theory territory because people are, for the most part, partisan and only interested in this story to the extent it tarnishes in their mind their political enemies, when this is really not the case, and that there is no evidence that we can connect the political folks to what Epstein did that was wrong. We can look very critically and with skepticism at some of his ongoing associations with political figures, maybe like Steve Bannon, Stacey Plaskett, and others that I keep mentioning, where they had ongoing contact with, again, not any evidence of actual sex criminal behavior on their part, but continued contact with him well into the end of his lifetime that we would like to know more information about. But even that is just, why did you keep talking to a guy who had been, to prison for this? It's not, there's no evidence against them of sexual impropriety either. The one person of significance who got accused in the public, Alan Dershowitz, she recanted that accusation. So I'm forced to concede that, but then maybe this is how Democrats feel now. Maybe it's been made into this is Trump is involved in sex crimes. That's what they think. It's wrong.
Well, I think the saying probably involved, was what was happening on TV.
Highly involved.
Yeah, that's not.
They didn't even say probably involved. They said highly involved.
Involved in any way. That's, again, not. We're steering so far away from the actual issue, which is to provide a victim-centered response. Epstein was an actual criminal. We know that Ghislaine Maxwell was a convicted criminal and still is behind bars. And so even if it doesn't matter if you care about this to understand how this can never happen again and want to follow the money and follow the connections possibly to foreign governments that may have protected Epstein, if you want to figure out how to center victims in your response and solve this for the victims of people that we know have been, their lives have been diminished by Epstein and his crimes, then these are all reasons to move forward. But every time we start to add this in and look at Bill Clinton, which we'll talk about more later, and look at the president, these are fine to hand out, but when they become partisan games, this is when it gets exhausting and we're losing the entire point of why people actually began to care, or like me, got more interested in finding out and getting to the bottom of what's going on with Epstein. I mean, it's entertaining at some level when people are posting pictures of old birthday cards, but at some point there are real people out here whose lives were completely changed by this man in a very terrible way. And so I think that at the least we should try to get them real answers that they're looking for.
Yeah, I want real answers, but I also think it's a partisan game and increasingly a witch hunt as far as our major political folks are concerned.